Hey everyone, this is Alexander James Guitars, and this is episode 2 of the fretless guitar build on Make It Monday. So on today's episode, what we're going to be looking at is getting this white veneer in every single one of the fret slots to make this a fretless, gluing it in, and then potentially gluing the fretboard, or at that point fingerboard, onto the neck. So from our last video, we installed the truss rod and lined it all with silicone. Now that's dry, and I'm just going to take off the tape here. Just peel it off. And this is ready now to have a fretboard, or in this case, a fingerboard, glued on here. I just wanted to take a second to explain how I like to cut fret slots. In the previous video, you saw that we cut the fret slots on the CNC. Now, I use a router bit, and what happens is, I'll use this Allen key as an example. That router bit goes in to the wood and doesn't just go straight across like a fret saw would. It actually goes in and then does a radius cut along the length of the fingerboard here, or the width, sorry. And the reason why I do this is because it doesn't take out as much material. Now it's taking out enough material that it needs to for the actual fret slot to be the right depth, but it's not taking out a larger portion of material in the middle than it is at the sides. What it does is it helps keep a lot of that structural integrity intact in the fingerboard. I'll show you what I mean by that. Plunge cutting the fret slots on the CNC makes for a very strong fretboard. Traditional fret slotting causes the fretboard to actually bow, whereas this one remains straight. Because the bottom of the fret slot has a 12-degree radius, I need to cut out these matching wood veneers so that they can fit into the slot perfectly. I just have a 12-inch radius here, and I'm going to trace the bottom of the radius, and then I'm going to cut that out and individually fit a piece of veneer into each one of the slots. So I've cut the piece of the white wood veneer, and I'm going to fit it. And there we go. Fits in the slot nicely. Now I'll do this another 21 times. So there we go. All of the fret veneers are finished. They're cut to each slot size. Now what I want to do is I want to go in and I want to fill each slot with super glue, and then I want to slide in one of the fret veneers. You don't have to worry about the mess because we're just going to sand the fingerboard later. And just make sure it's properly seated and then move on to the next one. So there we go. I've glued them all in with the super glue. Doing this technique, you have to move fast because the super glue dries very fast. It's also really easy to glue your fingers to the pieces of the wood veneer, so be careful with that. But the second it gets rock hard, then you can take these back with a chisel. I'm just going to take my chisel and trim off these white veneers off the top here and try and get it as close as I can to the top of the fingerboard. You just want to be careful because when you're using the chisel, try not to hit the top of the fingerboard. This is rough and we will be sanding the radius into it once it's glued onto the neck, but you just want to be mindful of what you're doing so that you don't damage the top of the fingerboard. I have the veneers as close to the fingerboard top as I can get it. Now I'm going to glue this onto the neck. You'll notice I have 4 holes here. Those were originally to locate the neck blank on the CNC when it was being milled, and I'll make a video of that later on. Those holes are also used for locating pins. And I just use this aluminum rod stock to create locating pins. And those locating pins help locate the fingerboard onto the neck. It just helps when you're gluing. The glue doesn't cause the fretboard to slide back and forth because the pins hold it in place. So right now I need to cut some pins off of this aluminum stock that will be put into the neck so this can be glued on. So I've put the aluminum pin into the neck and I want to measure the depth of the holes in the fingerboard. Just going to be using the calipers here. I'm going to be using the end. I'm just going to bottom it out in the hole. 0.113 of an inch. And then I want to put it up against the pin that's bottomed in the hole in the neck. And then just with my Sharpie here, mark on the pin where it needs to be cut. And I'll cut that, file it down a little bit so that there's just the smallest gap from the top of this aluminum pin to the bottom of this hole in the fingerboard. And I'll repeat the same for the front. I only use 2 pins. I'm just going to test the fitment of the fingerboard to the neck with the pins installed. So there we go. Pretty good. Nice and snug. Exactly what I want. It's time for the glue. The fingerboard is ready. I've got a sanding beam ready to use as my clamp. Clamps, some glue, and I'm going to just line 2 beads of glue here, spread them out, pull off the tape, try and get it as close, the glue that is, to the actual truss rod, and then we'll put the pins in and pop on the fingerboard here. You don't want to go too light with the glue, because this operation you want to give yourself time, and if you run the glue too light, it may start to set up on you, and then it's really hard to, you know, get the fingerboard on there properly. So I'm going to put more on the side closest to me. It's, in my opinion, it's better to have glue squeeze out and deal with it later than have not enough glue in the joint, or have it so that the glue's setting up because you spread it too thin and you're racing against time. So I'm just putting a really light hand pressure here. Pull off the tape, set it aside, and I will just start working the roller close to the truss rod. Use my finger just to get into spots I want some glue. Pop in the pins. Just put a dab of glue on the top of the pins. Now it's time to put on the fingerboard. Just use hand pressure to squeeze out all that glue, even before we put the clamps on. I'm just going to grab some paper towel here. Just some damp paper towel. Going to push the fingerboard down and just clean up some of this glue here. As much as you can, just to save yourself some time. The rest of the neck will be sanded, so it doesn't really matter, but getting all this can be a little difficult later on. Okay. I want to put this on, overhang it a bit here. Just a piece of wood to protect the bottom of the tenon here. Oh, I grabbed the wrong clamps for there. Here we go. And there we go. We'll let this dry.